Hey, folks.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being flexible on the scheduling of this meeting from last week. Appreciate it. Not much housekeeping to get through today. Just wanted to remind everyone of the upcoming Global Summit on the week of the 14th in San Jose. If you've been in the past, you know what a big, exciting event it is. If you haven't been, we encourage you to join us. We've got a full and fun sustainability track planned. And speaking of the sustainability track, if you are on that track, you should have submitted your draft presentation on Monday. So we'll be looking those over and giving feedback over the next week, I believe. And then you'll have some time to incorporate that feedback. But certainly if you have questions on your presentation, want to consult with the sustainability project leads, the folks that are going to be looking at your draft, feel free to reach out to myself or Shruti. Any notes or questions on the summit? Cool. Also, just to give a quick update on the joint project with iMasons on carbon disclosure, we will be having a session on that at the summit. So we'll have lots of opportunity to dig in and talk about details there. But if you're interested in seeing where we are between now and then, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the disclosure form that we've developed, again, please reach out to me or the other leads of that project, and we'd be happy to share, happy to discuss if you have feedback on that questionnaire. Again, the idea there is to simplify the process of disclosing embodied carbon figures to data center operators. We are hoping to have something relatively consistent so that suppliers can go through one process and sort of cover the requirements and needs of multiple developers. So that's a project, again, between OCP and iMasons Climate Accord. And the leads on that are from Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Schneider, along with Rob, who's on the phone here from OCP, and Miranda from the ICA. Any questions or comments on that? And any other announcements or anything that anyone would like to add to the housekeeping session before we get to our guest? Okay, so we are lucky to have with us Nuri Rajvanshi and Melissa Spaneth from HPE. And we talked in a previous meeting about how we want to do our best to hear from other organizations that have projects that are adjacent to, maybe overlapping with efforts that we are engaged with. So I just referenced that project between OCP and iMasons focused on carbon disclosure, less on how it's measured and more on how it's disclosed and kind of what the contextual data is that we're looking for to make sense of that data. And there is a very interesting and thorough project in the Pathfinder framework, and that's what we've invited Melissa to speak about today. So with that, I thank you for joining us, Melissa, and would love to hear more about the Pathfinder framework, HPE's interest in it, and sort of where you see the value in it.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start off giving you guys a little bit of background about why HPE was looking into Pathfinder, and then Nuri's going to go into some more of the details. But first, I was just going to give both of us a little chance to introduce ourselves because,
Thank you.
I think most people here probably don't know us. So I'm Melissa Spaneth. I'm a sustainable innovation technologist at HPE. I work in our corporate sustainability or ESG group on a team particularly dedicated to product sustainability and innovation. So I work on various projects and work with different product teams, basically to bring sustainability into the core of HPE's portfolio. Nuri, you want to introduce yourself too?
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. I'm Nuri. I'm new to HPE, been here only about 6 months now. I sit in our global operations team, and I'm a technical environmental program lead for our global operations efforts. What that means is we work with Melissa's team in executing our sustainability strategy, specifically related to Scope 3. That means our manufacturing footprint with our manufacturing partners, as well as our supply chain efforts. So through that, I have worked with the Pathfinder framework and collecting PCS from our suppliers, and will share a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation.
Great. You want to share the slides, Nuri?
And then Melissa and Nuri, maybe after your presentation, we're happy to answer any questions since you're new to this group about how OCP works, how kind of the OCP Sustainability Project works, and what we're undertaking, in hopes that you will continue to be part of the organization.
Yeah. All right. So at HPE, we made this goal now a couple years ago to improve the accuracy and specificity of the carbon footprint of our products. Here accuracy means, getting accurate input data, accurate information about our products, moving towards more accurate sorts of modeling of the carbon footprints of our products. And specificity means making the data more specific to particular product lines or product models. Because as we sort of sat back and looked at how we were doing carbon footprinting, both for individual products as we, convey that information to customers, and then also how we looked at the carbon footprint of our products as a whole for our corporate carbon footprint. There were lots of places where we felt like we were having to make, we'll say, inappropriate levels of estimations, extrapolation, and things that, as a scientist, were sort of offensive to me, at least. But I think also, the sustainability professionals in our team, recognized that it wasn't. We were keeping up with sort of standard practices, but we weren't really pushing towards a leadership position and kind of pushing the bounds. So as we saw requests coming in from our customers and saw that there was value in this information for our customers, we wanted to be able to improve this accuracy and specificity. We also wanted to be able to be more transparent and open with how we calculated the carbon footprints for our products and, for our products as a whole as part of our corporate footprint. And then, of course, like most large organizations, we have net zero targets and are developing a roadmap to meet those. And, it's trite, but the old adage, you can't manage what you don't measure, really sort of hit us, is that if we were not getting accurate estimates of the carbon footprint of our products, we were never going to be able to make meaningful reductions. And when we did make reductions, half the time that wouldn't even be reflected in the data that we were collecting. So we set out on this sort of journey to really digitally transform all of our product carbon footprinting processes. Again, both for our corporate footprint and for the product carbon footprints, individual products that we offer to our customers. Part of this was, that we needed to be performing LCAs and improving the carbon footprint models that we were using, because we have over 80,000 sellable SKUs for individual products, for physical products, and many, many more when we count things like software and services. We can't perform an LCA for every single one of those. So we will have to use different types of models. But we always want to be driving towards the most accurate models that are most reflective of the products that we're trying to model the carbon footprint of. And then lastly, we wanted to start sourcing carbon footprint data from our suppliers. So there's been a big push in recent years for companies to get their suppliers to set net zero targets. But as we started looking into our net zero roadmap and realizing that we needed, better data to really meaningfully map out that roadmap, we realized that our suppliers, we also needed to be pushing them to be providing us with better data and to be, making these same improvements that we wanted to make. So the data that we are looking to get from our suppliers includes manufacturing and assembly data, components, carbon footprints for the components that we purchased, and then also packaging and transportation. I think, Nuri, we can go to the next slide. So as we started collecting all this data, we realized it was going to be a big, organizational, I won't say nightmare, but challenge. So, as so much of sustainability is right now, many of our suppliers were, sending us information in PDFs or spreadsheets, or, and then we were trying to combine spreadsheets, and we just realized that that was not really going to hit that digital transformation, hit the mark for that objective. So we knew we needed to find maybe a more modern, a more digital way of organizing all this input data that we're collecting from our suppliers. So some of the requirements we had was that the method needed to include all the pertinent information. So things like the impact intensity. And I saw there was a question about water. I'll come back to that. But one of the reasons why, I've said impact intensity here instead of carbon footprint is that we were thinking forward to those future scenarios where we would want to include information about, water impact, about, potentially biodiversity or, other sorts of environmental impacts. As we work through, from the highest impact area, which is that climate change or carbon footprint, down to areas where our products have relatively less impact. So we wanted it to include impact intensity. We needed to be gathering and documenting information about the methodology that was used to calculate that impact, so that we would be able to go back and make sure that all the methodologies were compatible. Uncertainty. This is a huge thing. And again, I come from a background as a scientist, and so it drives me nuts when people report numbers without any uncertainty. And the unfortunate thing in the sustainability field is that oftentimes our uncertainty is enormous, sometimes as big as the value that we're giving. So it was absolutely critical to us that we start including uncertainty, because if we look at that uncertainty over time, it can help us understand where we need to focus efforts on reducing uncertainty, improving our accuracy, and it can also show how we have progressed over time and the progress that we've made. It also needed to include a validity period, so if one of our suppliers, say a factory, goes and starts purchasing carbon-free energy in 2024, we need to know if we are calculating a footprint for a product produced in 2023.
Yeah, I think that's something that I was saying.
Sorry, but, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I think, I'm not sure.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. We needed to be able to see when the information coming from our suppliers, or that we were collecting from our own measurements, what time period those data were valid for. And then we also needed information about the sources and traceability, so if we've used a particular piece of software or a particular emissions factor database in calculating the impact, we wanted to be able to have that information available. And then some other requirements were that it needed to be extensible, something that we could scale, that could change as our needs potentially changed in the future. It had to be machine readable, so no emails, no manually moving numbers from one spreadsheet to another, or picking them out of a PDF. Database ready, same sort of thing. We're trying to get away from spreadsheets into more automated databases. And then lastly, we wanted something ideally that was non-proprietary, so that we weren't tied into a particular company's, software or fee structure, those sorts of things. And so we did a bit of research, looked at a few different, types of products and systems, and the one we ended up on was the Pathfinder framework that PACT has put together. And with that, I'll just say, did I address the water question sufficiently? I wouldn't say it's totally unfair, but yes, there are plans in the future to look at water footprint. I can't really be any more specific than that, because that's about as specific as we've gotten.
Were there any other questions before I went into the Pathfinder? I'm not really tracking the questions.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in the chat, so
okay.
I think you can pop over to the framework itself.
All right. So as Melissa mentioned, we landed on Pathfinder framework as our choice of methodology that we'll use to request information from our suppliers and then organize it so that there is consistency. And I will go open the document in a minute, but I just wanted to give you a little bit, an eye sort of a slide to start with, where once we had the Pathfinder framework and looked through it, we created our own supplier product carbon footprint data requirements document. And this document gave suppliers a little bit of background on what we are trying to do with this data, why we are using, as Melissa mentioned, why we are using Pathfinder framework, the specific elements of the Pathfinder framework that we would request them to provide us, and the format in which we are requesting this information. So we've had multiple revisions to this requirements document now. The first version, we were sort of rigid, and we said we will only accept data in the JSON format, which is the recommended format within Pathfinder framework. And this was a little bit of tall order for most of our suppliers, as they don't have the capabilities right now to start creating JSON formats. Many of them didn't even have the capabilities to create PCFs. So you see here, this box here is how a JSON formatted PCF would look like. And this is taken directly from the Pathfinder framework. And we have created one for HPE's product. We accompanied this JSON format file with the table with the properties that we will require this JSON format to have. And which of them we think are mandatory, which of them could be optional, and just explanation of these properties. But when we got feedback that it is almost impossible for most of the suppliers, almost all of the suppliers that we reached out to have these files available in JSON format, we created accompanying Excel template. So we still haven't gotten away from the Excel template, but we basically named each of the columns in this Excel template to match exactly the JSON format properties. And what we are doing internally now is converting these files into the JSON. We've written a short script to convert these Excel files into JSON formats. As I said, the experience is mixed bag. With the intent is we reached out to, the intent was to reach out to suppliers that cover 100% of our hardware component spend, right? So we have effort to collect data from our manufacturing partners, but we want to reach out to hardware suppliers, all of the hardware suppliers. And we started doing this in 3 waves. So the first wave, we reached out to the biggest spend. Then second is the second tier, not tier, but second largest, and then the last is the remaining suppliers. We just spread it out so that it's easier for us to manage when we get the data to do, because it's impossible to ingest the data as it comes in, right? We have to do some kind of verification, checking, do a little back and forth in terms of methodology that they're using, what they're including, what they're not, and then finalize this information to be ingested into our calculations, basically. I can go, I don't know if many of you have seen the Pathfinder framework already, but I can quickly walk you through. It's this framework, and then send out a link at the end of the call. It's again publicly available document available on the WBCSD and the PACT website. PACT is this partnership for carbon transparency. And there were many partners and collaborators who helped put this document together. Before I joined HPE, I worked at Siemens, who has been a very close collaborator with WBCSD in putting this document together. And since then, the users of this document are many. I am not exactly sure how many from OCP members have had exposure to this, have used this. I am by no means an expert in Pathfinder framework. I'm basically sharing our experiences and how we are the users of this. But since I've not been an author, some of the questions I might not be able to answer. But the good thing about this Pathfinder framework is there is quite a lot of details available, and they have started from the very beginning on what kind of frameworks exist right now and how Pathfinder framework is a complementary document to these standards that exist on product carbon footprints. There is also a lot of depth on the scope from cradle to gate. There is on types of data that's acceptable, types of data that is not acceptable, etc. And all of this information is available in this 78-page document. The PACT network has also is also maintaining this GitHub document, which is a living document, which gives the technical specification of this PCF data exchange. So this is where we got the JSON format from, and each of the product fields within the JSON format is explained here, and the definition of these. What should be included, what shouldn't be included. So it's really very thorough, and it's a living document. So there is constantly updates that are happening based on the feedbacks that are provided by users and PACT members. The WBCSD is hosting a workshop during Climate Week in New York on PACT. I don't know if any of you are members of PACT or WBCSD, but I can send you more information on that as well. Yeah, that was really high level information. I don't know, Melissa, if you wanted to add anything or if there are any questions. Okay, I already see questions.
I have a question. Hi, my name is Andrea Desmoni. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Jose.
Sorry, no, Andrea, go ahead.
I was wondering, I think maybe just even kind of like high level, does this framework help the suppliers understand how to conduct the product carbon footprint? And is there, what kind of support is there for anybody that might be starting from zero?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the framework does have some details on how to calculate. Let me pull up an example. You see my screen, right? So there is a section within that called emission accounting, and it explains what the existing methodologies are for emission accounting, but also a little bit more details on different approaches that can be used to calculate PCF. So it does go into details. It won't completely do hand-holding on how to start from completely zero and start collecting your utility level data and how to start collecting your bills and convert that into CO2. There is, I think, some assumption that you have some basic understanding of it. But that said, I have had this conversation with many of our suppliers who don't have very robust sustainability programs and done some hand-holding myself. So we have, as a requester of data, we'll have to do some of that beyond this document.
Yeah, I have one question, Nuri. Thank you for your presentation. And this is focused on really manufacturing equipment. How do you see that this framework can be also applied to the building side, to the embodied carbon on construction, or do you think it's very specific to product?
I think the Pathfinder framework was put together with the mind that it's industry agnostic. So it can be used for any industry. So chemical industry, food and beverage industry, manufacturing, embedded carbon in any kinds of products. I think that was the intent of this framework. So it's one standard framework across different industries. But that said, I know there are other tools and methods out there. Specifically, you can think of the E3C framework that exists for building specific data. But I don't know if there are building data users who are using PCA framework, and that particular information I'm not.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, hi Nuri, Lalit here from Microsoft. I have a something similar question what Andrea asked, when these suppliers are doing this LCA and coming up with this embodied carbon emission number, like it's more of a, what kind of databases they have or what kind of information they have. So like, do you have some quality metrics or, based on the assumptions they have taken or the calculation they have done? And then, I mean, even though they are following some framework, but there will be some assumptions which will differ supplier to supplier, the way of calculation. Do you see that happening where suppliers are calculating number in different way?
I do see that happening a lot. You see this table, right? So there are within the framework, there is data hierarchies. So many of the suppliers only currently calculate corporate level data, right? So they are using revenue-based allocation to give us PCF numbers for everything HPE is bought from them, right? That is considered currently the lowest level of data that we are accepting. So we are always striving for more product-specific PCFs rather than revenue-based allocation. But if they just don't have the capabilities, this is also an option, right? Like we start from here and then figure out, and it's not a one-time data collection process, right? It's going to happen as frequently as we need it. As Melissa said, that as they're making improvement in their emission reduction targets, we might have to collect this annually or once in 3 years. And the Pathfinder framework does have some kind of like hierarchy on acceptable data, not acceptable data. But a lot of the determination we are having to do ourselves, what we are willing to accept and how much we can push the suppliers to give us alternative for what they've given. I don't know, Melissa, if you want to add anything.
Oh, I was just going to add that, part of the reason why we were looking for a very extensible framework is because we recognize that many of our suppliers are not necessarily particularly sophisticated. But we did feel that pushing them to provide some information at least gives us a place to start. It starts the conversation. It signals to them that this is something that's very important to us. And it just puts it on the agenda. And we do recognize that some amount of the data we'll get from them in the first few years is maybe not actually usable by HPE.
Yes,
but you gotta
that's what I
start
want.
somewhere.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And if someone from your team or your organization going to use this data, right, for making some related decision, something that sort of, and that's where it kind of not sure like whether you can use it or not, right? If you're getting proper process-based LCA number from one supplier for a component and then other supplier who is selling you similar kind of component, but the number is based on EIO, like what kind of decision you can make out of that data?
Yeah, no, I know it's difficult. It is. We, as an example, we sent out requests to our PCB suppliers recently. They were one of the suppliers that didn't have very established sustainability program, right? So the data that is coming from them, we understand it's not going to be usable, at least in the first year. But we've had multiple conversations with them to share, what kind of program they'll have to set up to get us this data in future. right? So that is one of the goals in here. And then if we can mark that data as not usable this year, but then review again next year, I still consider that as some success.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And no, I think, as you said, like some things to start with that make sense. At least they start working on it or start disclosing this information. But yeah, that makes sense.
And Andrea had a follow-up question about, helping to normalize disparate data, and how this would be an outcome of using this framework. And I think from our perspective, it's similar to what the carbon label standardization group has been doing, is just like, you've got to see what data and what information suppliers can provide.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, like, we just don't know. And so I think for now it was, let's see what's out there. Let's see what these companies can do. And then we can, once we have that information, we can better, make a strategy for, either how we work with our suppliers, how we support them, how we work with them, and what further requirements we can start to put on them. But
So you
first
don't have a
priority was just,
solution yet, but
Not
I'm
yet.
just in a joking way, like we'll get there.
yeah, I mean, to be completely frank, yes,
Yeah.
we don't have a solution.
Makes sense.
So,
In the CSM work group, we are looking to model data center, create a open data center modeling, where we would like to see, OCP acceptance platform is generated. We would like to see a model where we can get that model and use it for a planning purpose itself. Before even you can basically put the system on the data center. We are working on creating one, but we have not really started the complete work. I think this is a useful data. We need to align on what we really want to see as a system when we define what are the data need to be there, including sustainability and RAS, all kind of performance, all kind of data we are want to include as part of that framework.
And Melissa, thank you so much for your session. Actually, I had a quick clarification. Maybe that's also implicit in the other questions that you're answering. So this particular framework is essentially for reporting the net total carbon. Is that right? Which means it provides some guidance for the embodied carbon and also for the operational carbon. Is that the correct way to think about it?
So it's a framework that calculates product carbon footprint. So and it is shared in kg CO2 per unit sold, basically. So it includes the carbon footprint generated from manufacturing a certain product.
So it's only the embodied carbon portion then that it addresses?
It addresses both embodied carbon in the materials and also the manufacturing. So scope 1 and 2. Yeah, sorry.
the framework could be used for, for embodied, for use phase, for end of life. Just one of those, all three of those. We are only using it for embodied because we're just looking for, cradle to manufacturing gate emissions from our suppliers. We calculate ourselves all the use phase and the end of life. We will make our carbon footprints available in this format, when we get to that point. And then we would include, all of the different life cycle stages, but not as one aggregate number. The framework does allow you to specify, you know, each life cycle stage and you know, properly label the emissions from that stage. Does that answer the question?
Okay, so just currently the framework is being used to get data only related to embodied, then is that right? Okay. Good, thank you.
So how do we kind of align on what is the OCP format is going to be?
Oh, Alex, you're on
Alex,
mute.
you're muted.
Sorry, Sammy, what was that? How do we align on?
OCP required data format for embodied carbon or a sustainability profile in general, right?
So it's a question that we need to continue to work on as an organization, and one that we are hoping to advance through this disclosure standardization project. But very much along the lines of what Melissa was saying, I think we're focused on how do we encourage more suppliers to take part, just to measure and report in some kind of baseline acceptable way, but you know, given a certain menu of options. And once we have that data set, what can we learn about what is the industry doing now? How does data differ method to method? And then from that data set, hopefully it can inform where we go in terms of what becomes an OCP standard. Andrea, did you have something to add to that?
I'm just curious, just from like a practical standpoint, like we're at kind of an inflection point where we're deciding how to collect this information for the OCP work stream. Do we need to decide that if we're going to put that into the Pathfinder framework, that we need to decide that now, or could the two paths join at some later point? And if we did decide that now, is this like an open free framework? Could we have a centralized database where it collects, like, just practical, like how would that work, if anybody knows? If that's even a question that makes sense, like, should we be deciding that now?
The question makes sense to me. Not that I know, but I did feel like, because you know your work stream is, since it's working on like a disclosure format for this carbon information, I think it'll probably need a better understanding of the Pathfinder framework. But I think we should sort of dig into that to at least see, are we building something that is similar to that can fit into it, or you know, are we building something totally different? Not saying that building totally different is right or wrong, but at least we should be aware then what are we working, you know, what are we likely going to get out of it. I know multiple companies also contributed to Pathfinder, so there is obviously like industry drive towards both of these. Like there are multiple companies working in this work stream also, and there are multiple companies that work towards Pathfinder. So I think we should dig into it and see how similar or subset or different things are being built there.
Yeah, I agree with that, Shruti. I think harmonization should be a goal we are seeking here. It's the same industry, the same problem that we're addressing. It's why we invited Melissa and Nuri to come speak to us today. I think where we are right now in terms of the OCP process, we haven't done anything that, or we aren't proposing anything that would conflict with the Pathfinder framework. So really, it's just a sort of simple disclosure form. What is your number? How did you arrive at this number? But perhaps what we should seek going forward is to make sure that as we get more specific, we are in harmony with what we've just seen. And then Melissa, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I can wait.
No, please go ahead.
If you weren't done. So I was just going to say, you know, as we started trying to figure out what format we wanted this information to be communicated in, we used our position both as a purchaser and then a supplier, you know, of finished products to our customers. And we get lots of inquiries from different companies saying like, oh, you need to go into this portal and fill out our, this form this way. And we have our specific format we want the data in. And so we try in settling on Pathfinder, we tried to be cognizant of not placing an undue burden on our suppliers. I mean, we recognized already that we were placing quite a burden on them just asking for this information. And so we wanted to try and pick something that was going to be, I mean, there's no industry standard yet, right? And that's the challenge. But something that seemed like it was going to be more universal.
Location or distributed location?
Sammy, you're not on mute.
Yeah. Do we want to have a centralized location like some database where people can go and query, or you want to have a distributed, like each vendor can give their own? Or
yeah, and I think we specifically, so we looked at some products that were building sort of centralized databases, but didn't feel like they had a clear path to adoption, or to widespread adoption. And so, in lacking such a centralized database, we did at least want to choose something that was freely available and, pretty versatile. But point just being that we're cognizant of not trying to place too much of a burden on our suppliers. We didn't want them getting, requests from 15 different companies for 15 different formats. So we tried to choose something that seemed well supported and like it was potentially heading towards being a standard.
So, sorry, were you saying that you were working towards centralized database then?
We looked at it. So there are some companies out there. I think CDP has a product that they are basically trying to pull all the data from companies that report through CDP, and build a centralized like product or component database. But it was a paid product, and if a company didn't report through CDP, then they had to go through the whole like effort of starting to report through CDP, which was seemed like a big ask. And it didn't seem like that product was heading towards widespread adoption. It may be different now. But we are not looking to stand up any centralized database. I think if OCP wants to do that, the Pathfinder framework can still be a good way, because the Pathfinder framework is really about communicating, and transferring data and information, and it gives a standardized and comprehensive way to communicate, information about environmental impacts.
Mm-hmm. And I just recently, I think last month or so, Pact updated their website, and they have added a list of software consulting companies that they recognize as partners for this Pathfinder implementation. I haven't had a chance to go through any of this. We are kind of doing it on our own, but that's also an option. And how if it's recommended by the Pact framework, does that mean that they're all aligning on this, and will they maintain a repository somewhere of the data? Is that an option or not? I don't know answers to any of these questions, but
So I think now that the connection is made, it makes sense for us in OCP to maybe reach out directly to Pathfinder and see if we can sort of make them aware of what we're doing and again, work toward that harmonization. Any other questions or comments for?
In addition to
Sammy, go ahead.
Pathfinder framework, is there any other frameworks that people should be looking at it before finalizing it? HP is probably looked at other frameworks too, right?
We did. I have to go and dig up my notes on it. I don't remember all of them. I mean, the ones I remember was Pathfinder, this OCP solution. I don't think there were any other like open frameworks like this. Mostly it was products. But I can go and look through my notes, see if I can find that information.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you again. Oh, I'm sorry, Sadas, I didn't see your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I had two questions actually. One is that I'm also involved with IEEE. They have something called Planet Positive in terms of efforts on sustainability and all that. So are there any efforts to be trying to be, because we are trying to set up some metrics on the computing side, working with them. And I wanted to see if that is going to be part of it. And the second question is, this particular framework, is that, are you just kind of proposing it here? Are there going to be follow-up discussions or specific actionable items? Those are the two questions.
Yeah, go ahead. I haven't heard of the Planet Positive one, so I can't really answer.
Okay. So is this a totally HPE driven effort, or is it are you proposing it like for the whole OCP? I'm trying to understand what would be the logical next steps.
Maybe I can add a little bit. Oh, sorry, Melissa, did you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say that, you know, the Pathfinder framework is actually not driven by HPE at all. I mean, it's we've just adopted it for our own use. In terms of what OCP does, I think we would certainly recommend considering it, mostly from the standpoint of, you know, non-proliferation of standards and formats, you know, but that is really up to OCP. We really just wanted to bring it to the group's attention, because there is a working group on carbon, you know, standardization of communicating carbon information. And so we wanted to share that this standard exists, or this framework exists, and sort of our experience with using it, you know, just to make sure that it's considered as part of that work stream.
Yeah, so exactly the direction where Melissa was pointing. I think currently the thought process is that this Pathfinder framework was developed by, I'll call it like another industry effort. And in OCP, there is one effort going on to standardize like the carbon disclosure format, which also does the same end goal of being able to share the carbon information. So essentially, when we came across each other, the first step that was thought of is that we be able to exchange information and see, you know, how aligned or apart are we working. I agree that we probably do not want, you know, proliferation of multiple different frameworks and methods out there. But I think the very next step would be that we would need to understand this existing framework a little bit better and then compare it with the work going on in OCP.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that seems like logical follow-on. Thanks for noting.
And also, I think in addition to carbon, right, there are lot of other metrics needed for a system, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
We should put together a common list to what OCP is accepting it. Then this is probably carbon is part of it, right?
Right.
And we don't have the definition yet. Yeah.
That's right. And the thing about carbon, which I think you alluded to, carbon is an indirect metric. So it convolves some other subcomponents. It's a good metric because everybody understands it these days. But if you're really trying to track down and make improvements, you need all aspects that go into this carbon. And that includes energy, even potential recycling and things like that.
So 4 minutes left. Any other final thoughts or questions on this topic? Shruti, did you want to quickly introduce the metrics conversation or leave that for next meeting?
So let me actually just give a 2-minute brief info, especially because we intended sending out a survey to get folks' input. So what we are going to discuss in that survey, and then hopefully an open discussion in a following session, is the need for a standard normalized metric per device type. I don't know if you're able to see my screen. Okay. So essentially the need or the lack of need, as we sort of gather from inputs, for standardizing a normalized carbon metric. And this is particularly for at a device level. Now, the first goal that was thought of for this is essentially the first and main goal is to be able to compare carbon of similar devices. So one major leg of the survey would actually focus on sort of understanding what is it that the metric should be conveying. And what I mean by that is this is the broader of the 2 legs of the survey. So the broader leg will focus on asking about what is it that the metric should take into account. Of course, the carbon, but does normalizing mean it has to be normalized against the performance the device provides, or the lifespan the device provides, or both, or are there other attributes that need to be used for normalizing such a metric? Keep in mind the goal is that once such a metric is established for a particular device type, say for storage devices, once it's established for a particular device type, we can compare different models or products of that device. So different products which are storage devices can be compared in terms of that metric. The other leg of the survey that you will receive will go into a little bit depth. So this is a broad question about what attributes should be used in the normalizing, like performance, lifetime. The other one will go into depth and sort of talk about, ask inputs about the different type of devices and what exactly should be these performance metrics, if performance is the only one we are focusing on, or if there are other attributes we are focusing on to do normalizing. For example, processing devices. Are we saying, do we want to normalize the carbon per unit number of cores? Do we want to have the TDP or power rating in basically the normalizing? Similarly, if we are talking about storage devices, are we normalizing by the capacity? Are we using the throughput in the normalizing to express the net total kind of performance of the devices? So this second leg of the survey will go into this depth and sort of collect inputs on what are these particular attributes per device type that are most viable to use for normalizing, such that the metric makes sense to express, to compare the carbon data. So I know I maybe, ran through quite, rapidly. Hopefully the two legs of the survey will, have an explanation, and that will help us go into it. But just broadly, the first part of the survey is a broader understanding of which attributes do we think need to be expressed in the metric. And then the second part of the survey will go into particular device types and try to gather input about which type of metrics, which type of attributes should go into the metric.
Yeah, I would like to weigh in on this too. So
Yes.
please include me.
Yes. I mean, that's our intention of, actually if it works, like after the survey results, if there is enough, drive, we can do this as a working call also. Yes, Sadas, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is a good discussion. Appreciate your saying it. One suggestion, I can send it to you maybe offline. One suggestion is there are two aspects of these metrics. One is the convolved metric, like what you're showing, carbon per processor per, so normalizing it. Although that is good, that typically has less information than the separated metrics. So in your table, you had something like power for something, throughput for something else. My suggestion is it is not an either or thing, because you may need both the throughput and the power for each of the devices, for example. Eventually, the metric for each of the usage of the device may be different. But when you are doing the survey or collection, make sure they are separated out, is all I'm saying. All of the metrics may be sufficient.
Okay.
Sufficient.
For the survey,
all of the metrics may be necessary
Yeah.
before we can call it sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest, that's why I said what I said, something similar in that, I think the derivative components here, we can, if we have the key components in it, we can, build these derivative, indicators from the key components. So, yeah, so I this is great. I think, and I'm excited by it. So I just think we can, because I'm looking at how can we templatize this, and
Yes.
thinking about that. But yeah.
Okay. Yes. So in the survey, we can certainly, make sure that we capture all of these. Then it looks like what would be beneficial is we'll send the survey out so folks can answer, and we can, gather and little bit analyze the replies and tabulate them. And then next month's session, we can use for an active discussion on this itself, along with all the, inputs we gather from the survey. So I think maybe let's do that. Today we are out of time, but
yeah, just one more thing. I think more definition of what is that device processor means and course means need to be there, because if you take a GPU, what type of course you want to take it?
Okay, that makes sense.
Thank you, Shruti, for setting this up. Nice adjacent work stream to the first conversation. And thanks everybody for your time. We'll meet again next month.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, everyone.